Welcome to today's conversation series program, Women in Leadership. Margo Hoyt, Managing Director, Talent and Leadership Development at LHH, will be speaking with Michelle TaylorJones, Vice President, Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Manulife. Today, Michelle and Margo are talking about what it means to be a woman in the workplace, both today and as we look to the future. We will be taking questions at the end of the conversation. Please use the Q&A function to enter your questions anytime during the session, and we'll respond to as many as possible. Hosting today's program is Margo Hoyt. Over to you, Margo.
Thank you very much, Laura, and welcome, Michelle. I'm so excited for today's conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let me give our viewers a bit of an overview of your illustrious career so far and some of the things that you've been up to. Michelle is, as Laura said, currently the Vice President of Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Manulife and John Hopkins, based in John Hancock. In this role, she's responsible for the end-to-end vision and strategy to curate, implement, and execute the firm's global diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. Her scope of work covers both Manulife and John Hancock and all of their stakeholders, internal, customers, and community, which I think is really interesting. We'll spend some time on that. And of course, it's in North America, Canada, and the US, as well as EMEA and Asia, about 37,000 employees in total. Michelle's been in her role at Manulife just under a year, but prior to this, she spent 13 years at Dell Technologies as a diversity and inclusion leader there. Her work is clearly focused on reinforcing ethnic and cultural empowerment. Michelle has personally received numerous honors, including recognition by the Network Journal magazine as one of 25 influential women in business. She's a sought-after speaker and has been featured in Black Enterprise magazine, Huffington Post, Working Mother Media, and various other media outlets as a subject matter expert. In addition to her corporate roles, Michelle's also a co-founder of Black Women of Influence, BWOI, a New York-based organization for mid and executive level multicultural women. I think that organization was founded in 2007, a group of good friends getting together to do something for your community. You're on the board of directors, as board director, and also an author, which we may get a chance to hear some of that. Sonnets from My Soul is her published book, a collection of inspirational writing that she did as a gift to her children. Women of many talents. So thank you again, Michelle, for joining. It's really wonderful to have a woman with your background, your success already, and I know that there's much more to come. And we're really looking forward, as part of our celebration of what started as International Women's Day /month/season, to share your story, to inspire others, and to gain from the wisdom so that other organizations and other women can have the kind of success that you've experienced and can gain the wisdom that you were bringing to your own organization as well. We're going to talk, just the two of us, for about 30 minutes. And then, as Laura said, we are going to open it up. So this is another plug to everyone who's viewing. If you've got questions you'd love to hear Michelle's perspective on, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll be sure to get to as many of those by the midpoint of our conversation as possible. All right, so let's get started, shall we, Michelle? Are you ready to jump right in?
I most certainly am. I've been looking forward to this, hoping we can inspire so many of you out there that we can't see.
Excellent. So I've shared a little bit of the success that you've had and some of the roles that you've had so far. Congratulations again. Please tell us a bit about your story, though. Like, give us a sense of some of the key milestones, some of the turning points in your career so far.
Sure, thank you. And welcome, everyone. Excited to be here with you. Although I can't see you, I'm hoping I can touch you in some way during this hour. So it's funny because, as you think about going off to college, you're expected to know what you want to do for the rest of your life, right? Mm-hmm. And so I remember speaking to my mom, who's always with me, although she's not here still in person. And I remember saying, I just love children. I want to be a school teacher. And she said, a school teacher? No, no, no. I think you'll go into business. I can really see you going into business. So I did, as I always do, I take other people's advice and then I couple it with what I want to do. And I said, well, if I go into business, I'll major in business, I'll minor in accounting because I want to be an entrepreneur and I want to own a boutique one day. So that was the thought process for why business. As I graduated and landed at a bank, I was a financial analyst for about 2 years. Numbers, no human contact, late hours, looking at a computer screen. And if you know me, that is so contrast to who I am.
Interesting.
I remember having my first child. And it was almost like a metamorphosis that happened inside of me. I thought to myself, how can I impact the world in which she's going to live? How can I shape this human being, this woman, to be the strong leader that I want to be, crunching numbers? And I really started thinking about my career and how much more I could do to influence the world. So she was certainly a catalyst for thinking about what next. And so I started to approach leaders in the organization to just have coffee and have conversation around what they're doing inside their business. And I remember meeting this one leader. She was heading up the community banking group. And she told me that it was an opportunity to be a business development officer, but you would work within the community and you would touch lives. And I thought, how amazing. And she said, but we don't have an open role for you. And I thought to myself, you may not have an open role yet, but by the end of our conversation, we're going to find a way to do that. And fast forward, 2 months later, she did call me. She said, was so intrigued by our conversation and so excited about your passion that I decided to create a role for you on the team. And the rest is history. I've touched lives from then forward. So the moral of that is create what you want. Right? People will tell you what they have, but take what they have and from that, create what you want.
It's so interesting. I've worked with women at various stages in their careers, really helping them to find their leadership vision. And when they take the time to think about it and share it with others, share what it is they want, advocate for themselves and what they believe their purpose is and how they can add value. It's amazing what happens, right? It's amazing what happens, but it's something that needs to be unlocked often, right? That's terrific. That's terrific. And so as you fast forward, working within communities, really trying to have an imprint and make their lives better. A big step from the entrepreneur that you started out to be, perhaps working in a big organization like Manulife now, before that in tech. But that's really interesting. I also found it interesting that you knew early you wanted to understand the numbers. And again, I'll look at the research that we see for women. Often they need a champion to remind them that really it's about, you need to understand the business. You need to understand the numbers if you're going to be successful. Share about, how was that just an innate thing for you, or did you have others share with you how important that was?
Well, actually, selfishly, I decided to learn about the numbers because I said to myself, if I'm going to own my own business, I don't just want to focus on the products and services, but I need to understand my revenue stream. I need to understand the ROI. I need to know what I have, what I can spend. And so for me, understanding the numbers is just not important from a business perspective, but from a personal perspective, right? I think it's not natural for us to gravitate towards the numbers. And so we have to force ourselves to lean in. But it's not important to just be good at the service in which you're providing, but you need to understand what's the impact to the customer, what's the impact to your bottom line, and really being able to focus on the financial piece is equally as important as doing your job well. And so, although it may not be the most natural course for many of us, I think we need to force ourselves to really lean in to kind of understand and make sure that we're adding value and impact.
Nice, nice, thank you. You know, your perspective on ED&I is not just about internal quotas or even internal objectives only. Going back to your first experience and having an impact in the community. Can you share a bit about, you know, really how you see your purpose and the role of ED&I?
Sure. So I see it twofold. I see it both internally and externally. So from an external perspective, it's about how we show up as a company to provide goods and services, one, but it's how do we add value to our customers and our community? How are we showing up? Who are we partnering with? What are we supporting from a foundational standpoint? How are we encouraging our employees to donate where it makes sense? So from an external brand, that's building a brand that's strong in the DEI space, but then you pivot internally and you look at employees, right? And so DEI and diversity, equity, and inclusion, it drives innovation. When you have different perspectives, background, skill set at the table, the outcome will be different. It's not one monolithic way of thinking. That's one. DEI drives engagement and retention. There's a war on talent, diverse talent, if you will. Many people are looking at high potential women, high potential people of color, to really bring them into the fold of their industries so that they can maintain a competitive advantage. So what are you doing to really nurture the good employees that you have internally, as well as creating a strong brand to recruit talent externally? So I think it's twofold, and it's not one or the other, but it's one and the other.
Excellent, thank you. You know, it's interesting to see. There's not much that we can find that is the silver lining these days, but it does strike me that this pandemic, the social unrest, the financial crisis really that's going to be an outcome of all of this is going to force us to be innovative. And innovation requires diversity of thought. It requires diversity at every level across the organization and across our communities. So very, very important how that's just being brought to the spotlight, right? Brought in. Yeah. You know, when you think back over your career, and you mentioned the one person who made that role, really designed it around you and your passion, who were some of the people that have really had an impact in shaping you, who you are, and why did they, or how did they have such an impact on you?
Sure, I thought about this question for some time. And everyone needs a tribe. You can call it a tribe, you can call it a village, you can call it in a circle, you pick the title. But for me, family has really been the undercurrent of what drives me. And I think if I had to pick the group of women that really shaped who I am, it would have to start with my grandmother, who is Cuban. She was an English interpreter and came to the US came to Jamaica, I beg your pardon, with my mom and her brother on a small boat from Cuba through the Caribbean Sea for several days without water and food to come to Jamaica where she could find work. And when I think about that story, right?
Yeah.
I think about how we think we have bad days. We have bad moments. We have bad opportunities. I don't know if we have bad days. And I continue to really reflect on her story. I think about my mom, an immigrant that came to this country with my dad and really built an amazing life for my sister and I, knowing the language, not knowing the culture, and was quickly able to assimilate and ascend.
Right.
So when we think about, what fuels me, it's those stories. And I tell myself that I really can't lose because it's in my DNA, right? I am born of strong women such as my grandmother and my mother and my sister who continue to lift me up. So I think everyone needs to kind of reflect on who in their life really keeps them strong and sustainable.
I'm surprised, and I'm not, but how frequently successful women who have achieved senior executive roles talk about the influence that their mother and their grandmothers have had on them. And if anybody ever thought that, strong role models weren't important, right? You just need to have those conversations, to have somebody who looked at you and said, reach for the stars, right? You can do great things, and to have also demonstrated that, to have been so courage in their own journeys. It's amazing, right?
And then also women that are able to say, that's not your best. You're more than that. And so, tighten up your sneakers and keep running. You need those type of women as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Your kitchen cabinet, as you said, your own personal board of directors, whatever it is, the truth, the honesty, so important. That's great. Let's talk about today's context. We're in the midst of a pandemic, a financial crisis, social unrest. Let's let it all layer on. How do you see this context and its impact on women today? Because it's not a great scene for everybody.
It's not. I mean, it's not a great scene for anyone, but in particular, without COVID, I think women balance a lot. We balance our full-time careers. We take on the majority of the duties at home. And without COVID and civil unrest, we're superwomen, right? And I think what this has taught us is, if you didn't know that was a myth before, you sure know it now. The pressures to perform at work are different. You're not in the office with human interaction where you can walk over to someone's desk and have that type of brainstorm or dialogue. We're working from home, we're remote. Women have small children. They're not dropping them off and able to focus at home. They're homeschooling. You're dealing with pets that are barking in the background. You're dealing with elderly parents that you need to take care of and make sure they're fed. And I think this is what compounds the situation, which is why we are seeing an uptick of mental health issues amongst women. We're seeing women leave the organization by way of feeling that they have to choose. And then when we look at the statistics for women of color, it's that much more drastic. When you think about immigrant families, they typically all live together in a common space. And then when you pile on COVID, if one person has COVID in that community, everyone has COVID. And what does that mean? That means people can't go to work. People don't have access to income. People need to eat. They need to live. So I think, when you look at this in the broader context of not just corporate America, but the world, it is really, really complicated. And as women, we know we're fixers. We need to take care of everyone. But I think what this has really taught us is, in addition to taking care of everyone, we need to give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
It's okay if our environment's not perfect. It's okay if we can't take care of everyone. Because absent of realizing that, we're putting ourselves at risk. And I think this is what this new environment has really taught a lot of women.
Yeah. So you personally, and you're a woman, you're working through all of this. What have you learned about yourself over the course of the last now full year in our situation?
You know, it's funny because it's either fight or flight for me. And so I typically don't do flight. And so, you know, I've had to kind of lean in and figure out this technology thing and figure out how to work from home. And, you know, you're not in a studio recording panels, you're creating these studios in your home. Margo, you know, prior to this, you and I talked about, well, is this on and is that light on? And will the internet go out? It's really teaching me that even if you want to be perfect, success all the time in this environment is just not going to happen. And you have to give yourself permission to not be on your A game all the time.
Yeah.
Internet will go out, your face will freeze on Zoom, the dog will bark, things will happen.
Yeah.
And I think what's so amazing about this opportunity is, you know, sometimes we go internal and think we're the only one that's experiencing this, so we need to keep it quiet and not tell everyone. But when we share, we realize half the free world is having the exact same experience, and it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, just opening up these conversations. Again, if we can find some cultural shifts through this, through necessity, we got to talk about this. Right?
Absolutely.
We've got to lift each other up. We've got to help each other out. I have my poncho girls. Hopefully some of them are listening today, but we need each other, right? We need the women to be there. And, you know, one of the other things that I found which really help, every day is a new day.
Yep.
Today may go off the rails. Tomorrow we can start new, and that's okay, right?
That's the gift that we have. We didn't write today, but we have tomorrow.
Yeah, that's terrific. So Manulife is recognized regularly as being a terrific organization and an employer of choice, if you will. The 2021 Bloomberg Gender Equity Index for 3 years, one of Canada's best diversity employers, number 100 on the Forbes 2020 World Best Employer list. What do these awards mean to Manulife? And I think for our viewers, what's really been key in reaching these levels of recognition?
You know, being 6 months new into the organization, I came on board and I realized that the company's really got a great stride going. We have goals and KPIs targeted towards increasing female representation at the leadership level, not just gender, but also BIPOC. We're really growing our women ERGs globally, really being able to empower our women to really focus on the areas that are important to them. We've increased our benefits and increased mat leave in Canada, which was hugely important to our women. And really taking a look at work from home and understanding that there is a different dynamic, that women are balancing both work and family and giving them the space and grace to be able to perform at the level that is their best, understanding that this is, you know, these are unprecedented times, right? And so some of the innovation and some of the work that we're doing, we've never had to think about this before. And so I think those are just some of the examples in which we have excelled at Manulife. And of course, this is all in an effort to not just attract great women, but really to keep the great women and the great talent that we have in-house. At the leadership level, we have a CHRO, our CHRO, Pam Kemet. She is a staunch advocate. She leads by example. And so I think when you take a look at your leadership, right, it really starts at the top. And when your leaders are walking the talk, it makes a huge difference. And it's a huge impact on me.
Right. Well, and you have a CEO with Roy Gorey who's
Yes.
absolutely demonstrating, walking the talk, makes it a smoother path for you. To organizations maybe that are just starting out, Manulife's been at this for a while, as you said, either just seeing that equity for women is important or just being able to focus on it. What do you think are some of the most important strategies or tactics to take care of up front?
Sure. So I think one of the first things you want to do is really just take a cultural audit of a baseline. Where are you as an organization in terms of readiness, right? So it's not about what the competition is doing, but meet your organization where they are. Take a look at the leadership. Are they ready to commit and push the goals and KPIs down into the organization to support employees to be their best? Are you ready to launch ERGs? And if so, where do you start, right? Do you start with gender? Do you start with BIPOC? Take a look at the partners that you currently have relationships with. What are their charters? Are they committed to DEI so that there are collaboration efforts there in terms of branding the organization in the best light? I think the first thing you have to do is take a baseline, and those are some of the things you can do. And from that, you understand where the organization is to be able to build a strategy that works specifically for you. I think that's the most successful way, because when you understand where you are, you understand what it takes to get to the next level.
Right.
What may work for one company based on where they are may not work for your company. And so for you to be successful, you have to measure against where you are.
I think one of the questions that's coming up today is, where do we focus, right? Do we focus on gender? Do we focus on the BIPOC community? Where do we focus? Can we have it all? Does it have to be an either or can it be a yes and? What are your thoughts?
I think it has to be a yes and. The world is yes and. And so we are a world made up of gender, LGBTQ, veterans, disability status. And so when you take a look at diversity, it is looking at all the ways in which we are different, right? And so typically, when companies start their DEI work, they start with gender, and then they move throughout and go to people of color. And there are opportunities for intersect, i.e. women of color, and programs around that as well. You can't boil the ocean. You have to decide what's important for you as an organization and build a strategy around that.
Fantastic. I'm watching my clock here. I have so many questions, but I can't dominate all of these. From an individual perspective, let's think about this from you giving advice to your younger self, or I know you must do a lot of coaching and mentoring of women and peers. What's the best advice, or what's the most common advice maybe that you're sharing these days with other women?
Yeah, a lot of, excuse me, the feedback that I get from a lot of younger women is, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my voice. Mm. And, what I know is when you're one of only in a room, it's hard to speak up, right? Yeah. What you have to say may not be popular. It may not resonate with others. It may not be politically correct. I may be seen as an outsider versus an insider. But what I always tell people that I mentor is, if you are in that room, you have earned the right to be in that room. No one is doing you a favor.
Yes.
Not put you in the room because it was a nice thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Putting you in that room because you've earned the right, and because you have earned the right to sit at the table, silence is unacceptable. It is unacceptable. You have to step up. You have to lean in. You have to get that imposter out of your head that's telling you, well, maybe this is a silly question. Maybe someone, stop the noise in your head, right? Step up, perform, be a voice at the table because you have secured your spot in the room. And so that is the one message that I say over and over and over. Silence is just not an option.
Yeah, totally get that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Was there something that you had to get over to really unlock success personally, Michelle?
You know, I think we all kind of see ourselves differently than others see ourselves. You know, my mom was a great advocate, but she was my toughest critic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you would race home with your report card, and I would say, and I got an A, and she would say, but the highest is an A+. And so, I think for me, it's giving myself permission to just stay present and in the moment and celebrate not only the big wins, but the small wins, because I've earned it and I've worked for it. And I think for me, it's really just being present and celebrating the wins. And then the other part of that is allowing others to celebrate me. I think as women and as girls, we learn we have to be humble and we have to be graceful and we have to, and so it's just relearning some of that training that we got early, that it's okay to have others celebrate you. That's okay.
Yeah, we have.
That's what I work on.
Yeah. That definition of what is ladylike, or what does it mean to
Correct.
be, we're redefining, and you've got to
Yes,
be
we
comfortable in your definition. Yeah, that's
Yes,
powerful.
sure.
That's really
Yeah.
powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm not sure that that was in the question list, so thank you. We're going to open it up to some questions. They're rolling in here. The first one I want to really start with is let me just roll down here. Sorry. I'll start with an easy one. Tell us more about your organization, Black Women of Influence, and then I'll keep sorting through these other ones as they're here.
Oh, sure. About 10 years ago, two girlfriends and I were just kind of sitting around in the living room and talking like we typically do about being the only in the room.
Right.
And how that feels. And wouldn't it be so wonderful if we could get a group of women together that had a safe space that could come together maybe monthly to talk about some of the similar experiences that we share that we tend to think is just individual to us. And it started 10, and we've grown in 10 years to about 500 plus members. And so we have programming throughout the year. We have programming where we have an author's corner for women who have written books that can come and share. We have financial literacy. We have mental health workshops that we've done given COVID and just all that women are experiencing. So it's an organization that was founded out of necessity and has grown to a great space, and we support a lot of women.
That's amazing. That's amazing. never knowing that you were going to have a pandemic that would even heighten the need for it as it has, I'm sure.
Exactly.
You know, many organizations are just getting started, and there are some questions in here about how do we get going. One of the questions are around what are some recommended tools to help assess our current state or the baseline, as you talked about, so to determine where you need to focus and what your priorities should be.
Yeah. You know, every company does an annual survey. And so that's just a great opportunity to possibly add 3 or 4 DEI questions around, are you a part of an ERG? Do you feel supported in the organization? You know, are you experiencing commitment from leadership? What more can we do around that space? Should we have DEI training? Is that something you would participate in? I think that's a great opportunity to kind of shape something that's already done in the organization that's really going to report back the answers that's really going to give you baseline percentages of how ready the organization is to really do the work. And based on that analysis, you begin to put a strategy together that meets the needs of your employees.
Right. And it's so important, as you said, it's got to suit your organization and it's got to be hooked to your strategy,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
What's important for your organization.
Absolutely.
Here's an interesting question, you know, and it's a longer statement, so I'm going to get to the bottom line. And it's really about women can be very supportive of each other. And sometimes there's been a reputation for them knocking each other down for whatever reason, right? How do we overcome this? How do we really promote and create the stronger together perspective?
My perspective on why that happens is there's not enough of us in the room, right? Men don't do it. They're the majority in the room. They disagree. They get mad at each other. And in an hour, they're on the golf course playing golf. We as women don't do that. One, there are limited spots at leadership and executive levels. So there's a competition factor there, one. Women need to communicate better. Not that we need to act as men, but we need to say what's on our mind, and then we need to move on to the next thing. We tend to hold, have resentment, not talk to her, eliminate her from the conversation because of what she said. I think we look at some of the ways in which we behave. I think we could do things a lot differently, but I think that definitely comes from not a lot of us being at that level. There's 1 or 2. And so because we're competitive, some women feel the need to, in order to rise above her, they need to pull her back. I don't have to subscribe to that. I think there are so many jewels that can go in a crown. We can all shine. And so I don't understand that philosophy and tend to not be in those communities that practice that. But I think we have a long way to go as women on that one.
You know, it's interesting because in order for there to be more women at the table, we need to make space for them. We need to promote them, right? We need to pull the chair out and have them sit beside us, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And I've talked to many senior executives who say that this is now part of their purpose, is every time they see someone on LinkedIn promoted or appointed or recognized, applause. May not have ever met them before, but raise them up, right? Send a quiet note. Be there as that mentor, as that champion to lift others up and make more places around the table.
I call it fixing your crown.
I like that.
And it's crooked.
There are lots of jewels to put there. I'm going to take that one, jewels in the crown. I like that. Can you speak to whether diversity includes age diversity? So this is a 62-year-old woman with deep business experience and constantly advised that ageism is a reality. Is it?
It does exist. I think it's very transparent. But what I truly believe in this time of COVID is that, you know, you really have the opportunity because we're all on equal footing.
Yeah.
We're all at home, we're all behind a screen. And so your skill set, what you have to offer can really shine right now. This is an opportunity where, although age may have been a factor in the past, I think it's an even playing field. It's an opportunity for you to go for it. It's a totally different environment. This slate is blank. And so my advice to you is paint it any way you want it. This is an opportunity to create. We're in a space of creation. Everything is different. And so how you create, how you show up, and what you have to offer is all about the energy that you're going to bring. So that's how I would answer that one.
Nice, nice. There are some questions about whether there will be a recording of this after. Yes, there will be. So let me address that really quickly. Comment here that your mother and grandmother were important mentors and inspirations in your life. What about the men in your world?
So let me tell you about the amazing man in my world. The amazing man in my world turned 101 in February. And
wow.
what I discovered and what I loved most about my dad, who was more subtle and quiet and giving, and my mother was just a rock star. He allowed her to be who she was. She didn't have to minimize that. She didn't have to change or alter that to fit who he was. He gave her the space to be the strong, amazing woman that she was. And my experience, my first experience around men is you can do anything you want to do. And if you can't do it, I'll show you how to do it. But there wasn't a gender conversation in our household because my mother was a rock star. She could do anything, and she made me feel as though I could do anything, because she certainly was not a shrinking violet. Not quite sure anyone would consider me a shrinking violet.
It's interesting, again, just a really wonderful set of role models in your life, right? And how important those are. We need to see those, we need to find them, we need to promote them for our communities. Here's a question. Tips to advocate for yourself, increasing your visibility when working from home, limit your access to others in the organization. And this is coming from a queer woman of color.
You know, what I have found, COVID has really made people very relaxed, right? And I think there are times when we need to realize, although we're working from home, we're not on vacation. We are working from home. We're in front of leaders, we're in front of clients. We need to show up, we need to be ready. We need to be organized. We need to be our best. And so I often tell folks that you may not be physically in the office, but mentally you need to be in the office.
Yeah.
So you need to be on your A game. You need to present well. It's in times as this that you're being assessed differently. How agile are you? How are you able to conform and contort and really show up and still be your best? So I offer to everyone, be mindful that we're not home on a vacation.
Right.
We are still working as professionals, being leaders, brainstorming. We have to bring that energy to the conversation and that thoughtfulness. And it's important because it's being noticed.
Yeah.
And so I just ask us to be mindful of how we show up both mentally and physically.
Yeah. I want to make a comment here too around networking, because we know around career advancement, we individually need to take accountability for our own networking, and organizations need to support us. And some of the research shows that men are great at networking up, and they will naturally ask the boss out for a game of golf or something, and I'll be, very stereotypical there. Women, according to the research, are more often going to network with other women and network down, which not as great when you're looking for sponsorship and champions and advocacy in the organization, right? So even though we're remote, what's the advice to keep networking and to network up, if you will, to get that visibility?
So when you ask that question, the first example that comes to mind is when I graduated from college. I graduated that May and hadn't landed a job. So I signed on to a temp agency at a bank. And the assignment was for 3 months. And so August came, and throughout the time, I'd been heard, you're doing great, you're amazing, you're wonderful. And the CFO would pass my desk every morning and we would say hi. And so it was the Friday of my last day. And I remember I glanced over and I saw his door open. And me, in my naive little 20-year-old self, walked into his office, past his assistant, and said, "Do you have a minute, Ed?" And he said, "Yeah, I do." What is he going to say? I'm standing at the door. He's probably like, who on earth? He asked me to come in. And I said, Ed, I say hi to you every morning. My boss is telling me I'm doing a great job. You even told me I'm doing a great job. Well, my assignment ends today, and I need a job. And I need a job on Monday. Would you hire me? And he said, I absolutely would. How much do you want to make? That is the question that I was not prepared for.
Right.
And so I belted out an answer, and he said, "You're hired." And I thought to myself, you lowballed yourself because you
didn't
do your research. That only happened to me once, though.
Okay.
No, it has never happened to me again. And so he hired me. But what is so amazing about that story is Ed became my mentor.
Awesome.
I stayed in that role. He put me in mergers and acquisitions, financial analysis, and he and I met once a week. He became my advocate, my mentor, my sponsor, simply because I asked for what I wanted. And so don't be afraid to ask for what you want. The answer is not always going to be yes, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, the answer is not always going to be what you want it to be, but sometimes you get a yes, and it's a good thing. So that reminded me of that story in particular.
That's a great story, a fantastic story. And I think what's really also important when we think about visibility and generating visibility for young people is organizations can take a role in that, or individual senior leaders can create inclusive networking opportunities, whether they're conversations like this or development opportunities or one-on-ones, really for organizations to be mindful and executives to be mindful about how are they generating opportunities for men and women and all other communities to have that audience, right? Because we can't just walk by the office doors right now.
Correct. And I do want to add a huge hugely important piece here. Although Ed was a sponsor and created the opportunity for me, I needed to perform.
Yeah.
I needed to perform, I needed to show up, and I needed to let Ed know that he bet on me, and that was the right decision.
Yeah.
So that's equally as important. Having access is one piece, but being able to perform, because he's betting on you.
Yeah.
His brand and his credibility is on bringing you into a space and taking a chance. Your response is you need to show up and be your best.
Nice. You know, and it's interesting that with us being remote, we need to be creative about how we can. And there's some follow-on comments and questions coming in. You know, I can't just walk by people's offices. So,
Sure.
you know, important for the organization and for individuals to make those opportunities. But have you ever met an executive who's refused a one-on-one when it's been requested?
Absolutely not. Send an email. If you're on Teams, do a ping. Was just on a call with you. You said something really interesting. I know you're hugely busy. Do you have 10 or 15 minutes? That's all it takes.
Yeah.
Having the courage to ask for what you want. And I know that courage builds over time with success. But if you don't ask for what you want, you're not going to get it. Knock on the door and say, I think you want a promotion. Can I help you do that? Not going to happen.
All right, I'm going through the questions here, Michelle. There's a couple of others that are popping up as a bit of themes. One of these around work-life balance and flexibility and adaptability. So maybe just a personal perspective, and it's going to be a pandemic context, I suppose, as well.
Well, when I figure out work-life balance,
you'll be on a book tour.
I would be happy to come on here and another follow on. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Because you can't balance and give everything equal time. Your work, your family, and so you have to get that. First of all, you have to just dispel that myth and understand that you'll have different priorities on different days. And so today my priority will be work based on the deliverables that I have. Maybe Friday is less hectic, so I will devote more time to my family and balance there. It's a constant balancing act. So for me, on a daily basis, it's a constant balancing act. So I don't know if I have figured out the work-life balance, but I'm putting effort towards it. That's my answer.
It's an ongoing development objective.
Ongoing.
Totally get it. There's a few questions and comments in here around women of color in particular, Michelle. One is a very simple question, but a very complex answer, I expect. Can you please comment about the women of color specific struggles vis-a-vis white women? Yeah.
You know, I think it's a conversation that has existed for many years. What excites me and I'm excited about is out of a very difficult 2020, we can now think about 2020 and beyond. And I think what 2020 did for the world was really open our eyes to some of the inequities that have always existed. Yeah. But as a world, we're now leaning in to kind of unpack that. And so when we take a look at gender programs, we look at them differently. We say, of the gender programs, how many women are of a diverse background, right? When we have a dialogue around development and promotion and retention, it's moving beyond just the gender conversation to look at people of color as well. And I think when we speak about women of color, there are unique stereotypes and unconscious bias and micro inequities, none different than the gender conversation that we have to balance on a regular basis. But I think what's so amazing is, as women, if we come together as women to support each other just in a common space, I think we're that much stronger in terms of having the equity conversation. And so I think we're beginning to do that. I think, you know, just by way of the world's agenda in 2020, we are creating safe spaces where we can have conversations that we typically wouldn't have, and trusted conversations where we can ask those questions that we may have been a little afraid to ask before. But what we know now is asking those questions is all about creating just a better world for all of us. And so I think everyone has an open heart to do that. So I'm just encouraged about the conversation on the table, because we've moved from shock and awe to action. And that's a great place to be.
Absolutely. Michelle, I can't believe our hour is coming to an end. I want to thank you so much for sharing your personal story, for sharing your insights. Final words of wisdom or insights before we wrap things up. Over to you for that.
I think my final words for the women and the few men that may be out there in the audience is, we're more alike than we are different. And so although we talk about celebrating differences, I think it's also good to celebrate similarities. And I think we are all in a space where we're ready to have deeper conversations around diversity, equity, inclusion, and what that means. And being able to take the output of that conversation and really being able to put it to action where we can change our personal lives and our corporate lives just to be the best world that we can possibly be. So I'm encouraged for all of us. We have a lot of work to do. And thank you so much for allowing me to spend this time with you and share my insight. I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you again, Michelle. I'm inspired. I know that so many of our viewers are personally to take the reins in their own hands and elevate their own careers, but also to help the other women in their communities. So thank you again for your time. Really, really do appreciate it. And I'm watching some of the comments come in. I don't know if you can see them, but they're very appreciative. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Before we sign off, I just want to remind all of our viewers that this is the first of 5 in our conversation series with some exceptionally talented women. Please join us next week for Carleen, Alexander, and for the others in our series. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and happy International Women's Day, month, and season. Take care.